Shane here from New American Arms. Back today to talk a little bit about pistols, basic fundamentals of shooting a handgun, and what you need to know to get started and feel safe at the range. So what we're going to talk about now is, one, I have a belt on, I have a rig on, mag, pouches, holster. You don't need any of this to start, just your handgun, some magazines, some ammo. Go to the range, practice this drill. A lot of these drills you can practice indoors. You don't need to be able to move around. You don't need an outdoor range. You can go to any indoor range, get a bay and practice these. We're going to shoot paper today. We have 3 targets up here. We're going to go over some cadence drills on some targets that I made up to work on trigger discipline, compress ready draw, and then just ranges, throttling up, throttling down, things of that nature. But what we're going to start with is the basics, and then that's just going to be compress ready drawing. So compress ready, and then presenting that handgun. Grip's going to be a big one to control recoil. And then we're just going to do basic trigger control, working off the wall of your trigger, not fishing the gun around and not smacking that trigger, actually letting that trigger reset and then coming off that reset off that wall. So first things first, don't need this mag. Let's get that out of there. Check that gun, make sure there's no round in there. She's clear, she's clear. We're gonna work on this trigger. And then so what we wanna do on trigger is you wanna be able to, and some people like to put it in the crook of their finger, some people just like the ball of their hand on that trigger, on that shoe. That's all gonna depend on, some people have gorilla hands, some people have short little stubby fingers. That's all gonna be how long you know where your finger is when it's on that trigger, and what's comfortable for you is a big one. So what we want to work on is, so one, every trigger is going to have some play in it to get to that wall. So you can see right there, I have a little take up before I hit that wall. And then that wall is going to kind of be an indicator that that trigger is about to break after you put pressure on that. Once you hit that wall, it's pressure and then the trigger goes. So you want to find that wall, and then when you find that wall, pressure, that trigger will go off. So what you want to do is, after you do that, it's going to come back and reset. So we're going to do it again. There's that wall, there's that trigger. And then what we're going to do is, if there's a round in there, which is not right now, when you come back, it's going to reset that trigger. And then you got that slack, that take up in there again. So you don't want to have that trigger come all the way back out to this and then find that wall again. You want to round, and then you want to hold that wall and then come back on that wall again on that trigger. So you're not smacking that trigger. You're not taking that slop up every time. So that's what causes people to pull down on the gun, slapping that trigger. And usually what happens is they're going to shoot down to the left or something when they're pulling on. There's a lot of slop in that, and you don't want it. So you want to eliminate that, and that's a good way. So bring it back. There's that reset. You don't want to go all the way forward again. So pull the trigger, round goes off, new round comes in the chamber. Go back, there's that wall. And then so you want to go from there on your next pull. So you want to work on working off that wall instead of letting it all the way out and letting your finger off the trigger. Keep your finger on the trigger and stay on that wall. And then second thing we're going to work on, well, first thing we're going to work on is grip. And then so what we want to do is, you want to get as high up, your purchase on this gun, you want to get as high up to that barrel, to that bore as you possibly can. So that's going to keep you in line with that barrel. That's going to control recoil better than your hand being down here or something. So choke up on there, get a good grip, get a good purchase on that gun up high. And then so your support hand is basically, what I like to do is, you have these grooves from your finger right here. And these grooves, you can pretty much take this hand and sit them in that groove. And then what this hand is going to do is, you want to do a little squeeze, but this hand is also going to pull on this other hand to hold this hand, to support this gun, to keep this muzzle straight, to keep it from flipping up and down. Your thumbs can ride the slide if you want. Some people, you know, there's a lot of guns have some kind of texture right here. It's called an accelerator pad. Some people call it, you know, numerous things, but for the most part, a lot of these modern polymer guns, this is a CZ P10, it's basically all stock gun except for a trigger and a white light, and that's it. So mine has texture there, so that kind of tells me where I want to put my support hand, my thumb. And then most of them want to be kind of sitting right in front of each other, both pointing forward like that. And then your other hand kind of just wants to be in the grooves of that primary hand, that hand that gets the initial purchase on that gun. And then you don't need to put death grip on here, but you want to hold it tight enough. You want this to squeeze tight enough to where you can mitigate that recoil. You can control that recoil with that hand. This hand, you really don't want to squeeze death grip out of the gun, because one, it's going to take away from you concentrating on that trigger finger, working off the wall of that gun. So you don't need a death squeeze. This is going to be the one that controls recoil. This is going to be the one that supports this hand that purchases the initial grip on the firearm. So we're going to take a couple shots with this gun. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about as far as shooting and working on this control recoil. So now we're going to touch bases on actually finding your sights, coming out of compressed ready, presenting and finding those sights right off the bat, because that's going to be the third thing you want to do before you engage that target. Some people square up, some people lead with a foot. I do both. It all depends on where I'm shooting at and what I'm shooting from, if I'm behind a barricade, whatever. But you want to try to keep both eyes open. And me shooting as much as I have a hard time to do this all the time, because I shoot long range rifles and a lot of magnified optics a lot. So I tend to sometimes want to shut that one eye just to find my target and acquire my target. And I find myself doing it with my handgun all the time. And it's a bad thing. You want to get away from that. So what we'll work on is keeping both eyes open, presenting from compressed ready, finding those sights, and then working on that trigger control, and then letting that round go down range, acquiring that target and shooting that round. So we'll take a couple shots now utilizing those concepts I just talked about. And I touch bases on this every time. We don't have to don't work on speed right off the bat. Let's just work on A-zone hits. Let's just work on fundamentals. The trigger thing, I tell people a lot, and you can work on this dry fire, and the whole thing I just showed you was me with no mag, with no round in there. So you can work on resetting that trigger on that wall. You just have to chamber that, you have to manipulate the slide every time like there's a round in there to get that trigger reset. But besides that, you can practice that stuff at home with no magazine, nothing in the gun. So we're gonna run a couple drills now, utilizing those basic fundamentals that we just went over. So we're gonna start from compressed ready, and compressed ready is just how you would hold the gun, carry the gun before you actually presented it. So kind of close to the body, elbows bent, muzzle to the ground, and then we'll push out from there. We'll drive out from there to present the gun, find your sights, acquire the target. So one in the chamber, and then we'll start one. I'm gonna start with the timer. You don't have to, but we're gonna just concentrate on A zones, and we're gonna concentrate on trigger control and presenting that gun. So here we go. Let's do it again. So let's review what we just talked about, the drills we just did. So what we want to concentrate on is compressed ready, presenting that gun, driving that gun, and finding those sights. And then we want to work on trigger after we do that. We want to work on working off that wall and finding that wall every time, making those shots. So we also want to work on grip. We want to make sure our grip is right so we can control and mitigate that recoil as we're firing our firearm. And then also, a good thing to do if you want to make some targets at your house, you can. But I have a drill that I do, and it's basically working on like throttling up and throttling down, which is going to basically the targets are going to act as like longer range and shorter range targets. And then I just do these on a piece of paper. They're real easy. You can just take a coffee can, a cup, and a thing of hairspray, and you can just draw these on regular paper and just print a bunch of them out. I print these out, I keep them with me all the time. This is basically just a cadence target, and you can set these up at a fixed range, 7 yards, whatever. And what this does is the smaller circle is going to be a target farther away, medium, and then closer to you. And then what this helps with is throttling up and working on your speed. So obviously the closer the target, the more speed you can have, because It's right here in front of your face. There's only so sloppy you can get, and you're not hitting center mass. So you can speed up on these guys, but then as you get farther away, the target gets smaller. You're gonna have to concentrate more on finding those sights and discipline to get these hits on these guys. And like I said, you can make these at home, Sharpie, piece of paper, print 50 of them out. You don't, cheap way to find targets, bring them to the range and you can work on what we just talked about on these targets. Once you feel pretty comfortable about compressed ready, presenting that gun, finding those sights and those trigger fundamentals, you can start making multiple shots on these targets. And then that way you can figure out what you need to work on, where you need to work on, and these will focus on accuracy a lot too. And you could just stand whatever you feel, 5-7 yards away. You don't need to move on this. This target, you'll be able to work on this target standing at a fixed position the whole time. This target is going to make farther, objects farther than they appear. So the bigger circle is going to be closer, the smaller circles are going to be farther away, and you just stay at the same position, so 5-7 yards away, and you work on this. And like I said, you can shoot faster on this guy, but then as the target starts to get smaller, you're going to have to concentrate more on fundamentals to get good hits. So that way you're going to slow down. So take your time on these guys. Are going to be farther away. This guy right here represents something that's closer. And again, you don't have to move. You can stay static in your position. What I like to talk about too is that you don't necessarily need to start on the bigger one or the smaller one or the medium one. You can start on whatever one you want. And a lot of times I'll get a buddy of mine to label them like CDE or 1, 2, 3 or whatever, and then just yell numbers. So he'll yell like 3, 1, 2, and then that'll be medium, small, big, and then you got to shoot those targets. Or you can just start with the small one, take your time, and then work on up to the bigger one and throttle up in between. So obviously you can put more rounds quicker on the bigger target, and then you got to take your time and find that sight picture to acquire the smaller targets. But that'll just help you work one at distance without having to move and be at certain distances. You can stay right where you're at and work on that. Or, and it'll help you work on speed. So it'll help you know when things are closer, you can work on that speed and still have that accuracy there. And when things are farther away, obviously you have to concentrate more on making that shot and the fundamentals to make that shot. So we'll put a couple on this target and I'll show you how the drill works. So slowed up a little bit, concentrated on fundamentals, thought about those fundamentals before I did it. Speed on the first one could have been faster. All this could have been faster, but it would have resulted in the first one I did to where I had a couple sloppy hits, and that was just because I was trying to be a hero. So let's go look at this target compared to the first one, which we were a lot faster at. Slip this one guy at the end, and then this is why I bring this smaller guy in here. So this guy would be a target that you're trying to acquire that's a lot farther away than these guys, obviously. So this guy right here, I got one missing here. And in reality, on that small target, it's probably not a miss, but it's still out of the box that I'm working on. So that's unacceptable. And we're gonna need to run this some more so we can get all these. But these drills will help you work on those fundamentals and help you work on target acquisition and help you work on getting that accuracy you need from your handgun. And like I said, printer paper, Sharpie, anything you have round at the house, make a couple different size circles, bring it out to the range. They're cheap targets. You don't have to buy them. You can make them at your house. Everybody has a printer, everybody has paper, everybody has a Sharpie. So yeah, those are a few drills that we can do and some targets that'll help you get better at shooting with a handgun. So once again, there's a couple drills you can work on at the range. You can practice some of this dry firing at your house, and a couple targets that you can make up on your own and bring out to the range to help you improve your handgun game. And hopefully, within a matter of time, you'll be shooting like John Wick.